I just logged into the Sophie's user interface. Sophie is the name of our AIOps product. It can run both on-prem or as a SaaS deployment. And essentially what you see here is the incident feed. This is the main screen of our console. I want to start just really briefly say that when you start working with Sophie, the first thing you do is that you connect a new data input. That means that this is our term for collecting data from the server, from the device, or from your existing log management tools that you have there. So essentially, there's a long list of collectors here we support out of the box. In this case, let's assume that we have collected data from your AWS environment, which is what the demo is about. By the way, Guy, can you see my console? Just double checking with you.
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. So you define you install that collector, whether it's an agentless or agent-based collector, and then logs and metrics will be captured, or existing alerts will be captured into Sophie, and Sophie will take care of them. She will break them into list of key value pairs, but most importantly, she will start building baselines, and she will detect deviations from the norm. These deviations would be things that you want to be aware of, right? So it's whether you put their infrastructure logs or Cisco-related logs like we see in this example, or you put application-level logs. All of these data points will be used to detect deviations from the norm, which we believe would be things that you want to be aware of. So I'm going to start with an example that is coming from an application on top of AWS. In this case, it's a flight app that one of our customers has, and this app has a backend, and it helps them capture different types of APIs from their partners, which they rely on, and it runs on AWS. And you can see Sophie's ability to detect deviations or anomalies as they occur. In this case, we see that the backend service tell you that a lot of timeouts are starting to appear in the data, and you can see the actual pattern that was anomalous. You can click on the graph to see why Sophie believed this is an anomaly that's worthwhile, that you should be aware of. And then you can start to do your triage, and you'll see all the metadata, the meaningful entities that came. These are the way Sophie helps you to isolate the potential root cause of that issue, and all the metadata that we have parsed successfully from the logs when you scroll down. Now, the biggest thing I want to focus today is not only on the machine learning here that you can provide, but mostly about how you troubleshoot this and how can you use the integration with Ayehu to remediate these issues as they evolve. And essentially, when Sophie detects something, you can see that the Insight button on the top right side of the screen appears. If you click on that, you'll see that Sophie explains to you in plain English that this message, this error, is actually about cache timeouts that are typically the symptom of cache being either overloaded or down. And there are actions you should follow. In this case, the recommended action is to increase the cache cluster resources by adding more nodes or machines. Now, these insights are what we call tribal knowledge base. It's something we support for many years now. We work with subject matter experts to add them on a daily basis, but we also, you as a customer of ours, can add your own insight by clicking on the white button here. So as engineers know what to do with a given error log, they can add their own insight, and Sophie will learn from your experience and save it within the organization for future reference. So the more you use her, the better she gets and tailored to your specific environment. The cool part, so that by itself allows you to become both proactive and understand what to do with that to help you resolve the issue faster and improve MTTR. The idea, though, is if you know that something is evolving, why not healing it before it's too late? And that's where the integration with Ayehu goes into play. Essentially, when integrating the products together, you'll see that automate button appear here on the right side of the screen. When you click on that, you'll see the workflow that has been created with Ayehu that you can run from the list above. In this case, I'm going to focus on the first workflow created, which is AWS deploy a new machine, as the recommendation tells me to do. And before I'm clicking on that, before I actually run that workflow, I would say that you don't have to create that step if you want to do it with an automated fashion, so that you want to remediate this before even a user need to click on that button. This is something you can definitely do with Ayehu. Sophie will generate that insight with all its metadata into the Ayehu platform, and now Derek going to show you what they will receive as an input and how do they use that how do they use Ayehu to create a remediation workflow, which will be triggered once I click on the play button. So with that in mind, we talked about automation, we talked about anomaly detection, insight enrichment, correlation, and then using a trigger to create a remediation workflow. I'm going to pass the ball into Derek, and he will show you how this automation can be created and also enabled. So let me do exactly that. Derek, you should have the control now.
Yep. Thank you, Dror. Give me just a moment. Can everybody see my screen here?
Yes.
Showing the Ayehu audit trail, correct?
I can see actually the desktop.
Ah, okay. Hold on just a moment. I apologize. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Dror. My name is Derek Pasquarella, one of our solutions engineers here at Ayehu. So what we're going to see and what I'm going to show you is an event coming in live from Loom Systems, from Sophie, with a recommended action to create a new node in AWS. We're going to watch as using Ayehu's many out-of-the-box built-in integrations notifies the application owner via Slack by first querying our ServiceNow CMDB to find out who the application owner is responsible for the AWS node cluster. We're also going to watch as it creates a ticket in ServiceNow. We're going to watch as it spins up a new VM in AWS, updates the ServiceNow ticket, updates the user via Slack, and then solves the ticket. All right, so if we look here at our audit trail, this is a live incoming event list of all of the actions coming into the Ayehu platform. So on Dror's end, he's going to send over the automate signal from Loom. We can see that the event came in here, and we're going to watch live as all of these incidents occur. We queried the CMDB and ServiceNow and extracted the application owner, the application owner's Slack username. We created a ticket in ServiceNow. We sent a message in Slack, and we also updated the ticket in ServiceNow. We then created a node in AWS. There's our ID. We queried our AWS service to ensure that the node was successfully created, sent a message in Slack notifying of that, and then went ahead and resolved the ticket. Now, if we take a look at our Slack message bot, we can see that it greeted me here. Hello, Derek. We are now provisioning a new AWS node as per a Loom request. A ticket has also been created in ServiceNow, and it gives me the ticket number. And then let me know just a minute later the new node was created. Here's the instance ID, and that it will be typically ready within 10 minutes, and that the ServiceNow ticket has also been closed. So for example, if I wanted to take a quick look at that ticket in ServiceNow, come over to here, search for the ticket number. We can see in the short description, a request was received by Derek Pasquarella via Loom to provision a new AWS node. If we come on down to the work notes, we can see the initial update to the ticket. We can also see the final update letting us know the new node was created. It shared with us the ID, letting us know it'll be ready within about 10 minutes, and then it went ahead and resolved the ticket. So I'm going to return back to Ayehu here, and I want to show you how easy all of that was to do. I'm going to navigate to our workflow designer. And before I dive into the specific steps involved in this remediation process, I'd like to focus your attention on the left-hand side here where we see our activities panel. Out of the box, with Ayehu's native integrations, we offer over 500 activities that you can easily drag and drop onto your workflow here to bring immediate codeless, scriptless action to a workflow. For example, let's say I were to look in the Active Directory section, navigate to accounts, and let's take a look at create an account within Active Directory. I can just drag, drop onto my workflow just like this, configure a few simple data points, save it, and then just like that, this activity was brought to be actionable within my workflow. And as I said, no coding, no scripting, very simple. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And let's take a look at the activities that actually brought this auto remediation process to life. Here we are querying our ServiceNow CMDB to find out who the application owner is responsible for the AWS node cluster. We parsed out the name, the Slack username, and then we went ahead and created a ticket within ServiceNow. You can see how easy it was to select these properties here and give them values. I simply select from a drop-down list here and give it a value on the right-hand side, which are also drop-down lists to make it very easy. You don't have to remember all of these values. We move along. We're going to send a message in Slack here, which we can see. We're going to update the ServiceNow ticket to let the ticket know that Ayehu has gotten to work and is starting the process. And then here's some real secret sauce: our AWS launch instance activity. Very simply, all we had to do was select a region, a predefined image name for the exact type of image we want to deploy to this new instance we're launching, and then the instance type. I use a wait activity here of 5 seconds just to ensure there's no delay from the time that AWS receives my request and the time that I move on to this activity here, which queries AWS looking for information on the instance we requested, extracting the state value from it, and then moving on to our if-else branch here. We can intelligently say, well, if we see a state that is equal to pending, we know that it successfully received the request and the instance is in the process of being built on AWS. And as a result, we send a message via Slack letting the user know as such, and then we also update and resolve our ticket in ServiceNow. And alternatively, should there have been any sort of issue, we would traverse down this right-hand branch of the if-else statement, which would send a message in Slack and update the ServiceNow ticket accordingly. It could even escalate it so that people on the service desk could know they need to look further into the issue. Now you notice this if-else branch here is all part of our control section down here on the bottom left. These represent all of the classic controls you might see in any common programming or scripting language, and they work just as easily. You drag and drop them right onto your workflow, and immediately you can start taking intelligent action based on various conditions. So having seen the workflow designer and all of the bits and pieces that make up this remediation process, and having seen the audit trail where the event came in live to our system, which, by the way, let me show you how that looks. This is the entire metadata message coming from Loom, pre-parsed. All of the key value pairs are here. And our system looks for the recommendation field right here, where you saw on drawer's end, increase the cache cluster resource by adding nodes. So now that you've seen the audit trail and the workflow designer, I want you to see how simple it is to tell our system, hey, when I receive a notification or an event from Loom, I would like to kick off this workflow. So very simply, I go to our triggers section here, and you can see I have a trigger called new AWS instance from Loom. If I click on our right-hand panel here, it shows us our condition table. And to configure it, it's as simple as saying I'm receiving an incoming event from the Ayehu web service, and the recommendation field is equal to increase the cache cluster resource node. Very, very simple. The last bit I'd like to show you before returning to Guy would be our module section. So this here is going to really exemplify how simple it is to integrate with all of these third-party applications and services. So let's take a look at the components that were actually involved in the remediation process we saw today. First, we have AWS here. If I open up our configuration panel on the right, we can see that the only bits of information required to immediately begin integration with AWS was an access key and a secret key. Very simple. 2 points of data and immediately bidirectional communication between AWS and our platform is possible. Moving along to Ayehu Web Services, this is the API that sits on the Ayehu system that receives the payload from Loom, so then I can define a condition and a trigger and kick off the workflow that we watched. Moving down to ServiceNow, it's a very similar sort of configuration. 3 simple data points, a URL, a username, and a password. And while we're here in the ServiceNow section, it would be worth showing you all how simple it is to use ServiceNow. our platform, because it uses the backend APIs and is agentless, can automatically discover all of the form and custom form fields that you're using in your ServiceNow instance. And this is the same for Sharewell or whatever sort of ITSM platform you might be using. You don't have to worry about remembering them or defining them. They're all here, readily available. And last but not least, for some real-time communication, our Slack integration module. Similarly, I only had to define some very basic data points, our bot token, just telling it that we want to communicate with all users, and then our webhook URL. Very, very simple. And I hope I've done a wonderful job in showing how simple it is to use Ayehu to do automatic remediation based off of a recommendation coming from Loom Systems.